So, okay, here's the joke. This is little Timmy and little Jimmy. Little Timmy and little Jimmy woke up one morning on a Saturday, and they were trying to decide what in the world are we going to do on this wild Saturday. And little Timmy looks over at little Jimmy. He's like, I know. Let's practice using some curse words today. I learned some really good curse words while I was at school. It's going to be so much fun. Little Jimmy's like, all right, bet, let's do this. So little and Jimmy were like strategizing on what are they going to say and how are they going to use it. And then they hear their mom downstairs say, Jimmy, come down for breakfast. And so little Timmy and Jimmy come down, and Jimmy hangs back at the stairs, and little Timmy comes all the way downstairs. And his mom is like, all right, Timmy, what would you like for breakfast? He's like, oh, hell, Mom, I think I'll have some of those Cheerios. They're pretty badass. And she grabs little Timmy and takes him to the bathroom, shoves a thing of soap in his mouth, spanks him, and then sends him upstairs. Little Jimmy was hanging back on the stairs, and little Timmy walks by, and he's like, I don't know. And so then little Jimmy walks downstairs, and the mom says again, oh, hi, Jimmy. Good morning. What would you like for breakfast? And Jimmy's like, well, I don't know, but you better fucking believe it's not going to be Cheerios. So why in the world would I start off with this stupid joke about little Timmy and little Jimmy? Well, because we're talking about burnout, and believe it or not, one of the primary ways to reduce burnout is just to laugh. Don't take life so freaking seriously. When it's all said and done, we're not curing cancer here. We're trying to help people work better in the workplace, right? Like everything's going to be okay. Meta-analytic evidence would suggest that if you can just take a moment to laugh, connect with a friend, enjoy yourself, or go to a funny more, you can actually reduce burnout. But there's also all sorts of important strategies that I want to walk through as well. So first off, what is burnout? So from an organizational behavior definition standpoint, it actually has 3 dimensions that we're going to walk through, and they're all kind of connected. So exhaustion, cynicism, and efficacy. So when we talk about burnout, most people really think about emotional exhaustion. You just feel like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to lay down and not do whatever it is that I'm supposed to do. But it also has a lot to do with cynicism, which is this idea of screw you for even like putting me in this position of being burned out, right? Almost like upset with the source of the actual burnout. And then finally, this sense of like, I cannot do this anymore. This is just something that I'm going to wave the white flag. So it's actually a combination of those 3 that is really what we're talking about when we're talking about burnout. That's the Gestalt construct of burnout at large. So why is burnout bad is what we're going to start with. What are some of the outcomes that we're going to see, and why is it important? Well, number one, this is all meta-analytic evidence, meaning studies of studies have illustrated that burnout is negatively related to job performance. It's negatively related to job satisfaction, the extent to which you say, yeah, I enjoy and enjoy going to work and I like my job. Also, it reduces what's called organizational commitment. So this sense of identity and affect and this positive emotional energy towards the organization that you work for. It also is positively related to intent to turnover, as well as objective turnover in and of itself. People that feel burned out are higher likelihood of going to leave and trying to find different work or different organizations. It also leads to probably the worst outcome of all, which is that it's clinically related to things such as depression and anxiety. It tends to be kind of like a gateway drug to these more serious sense of experiences of not feeling well in terms of well-being. What causes burnout? What are all of these factors that actually influence the degree to which we feel as if we're burned out? Those are also important to understand. The first one is just we simply have too much work to do. There is too much work for the time that we have available. And a lot of the modeling is looking at what's called a job demands resources perspective. So you don't have the resources, whether it be time or energy. It could even be, the budget or the business-oriented constraints in order to do whatever is being demanded of you within your job. That's probably the most strongly researched and supported impact or variable that is causing burnout. Another is time demands. I simply don't have enough time to do whatever it is. So it might not be that it's something, blasphemous that the manager is asking me to do. It's just that this is a ridiculously short deadline in order to accomplish whatever it is. So time demands is hard. Another one is called role conflict. You're being pulled in a variety of different directions. I have two different objectives that clash, or I have two different priorities that I can't decide where to allocate time or attention to. And then another one is role, what they call role confusion. I don't even know what I'm really supposed to be doing. Like, what exactly is my job? What's my role? What am I responsible for? What am I not? That's another predictor. There's also some individual level predictors. So what we talked about formally was just the things that are more about the job, but there's also individual characteristics that make you have a higher risk of potentially being burnout. Those that are higher in neuroticism, they tend to have a sense of emotional discomfort. They get stressed more easily, and those types of activities essentially make people overthink or ruminate about all of the challenges they have ahead of them. Another is what's called a external locus of control. The visual here is you are a leaf blowing in the wind. I don't have any control really over where I land. On the opposite end, those that are higher in internal locus of control do have a less likelihood of being burned out because they do feel as if they can kind of control their surroundings and their situation. And then finally, another predictor is perfectionism. Like, you have to get everything perfect. Everything has to be right. Everything has to be under my control and purview. They also have a higher likelihood of being burned out. Okay, so now that we know the job-related causes, the individual level causes, what can we actually do about it? So this is what I've called the 5 stages of reducing burnout. And it really is kind of a layering type of approach, right? Where we're really going to start deep with the physiological and kind of get more external in terms of like managing your environment. So there's 5 things that we can really focus on to do. The first of which is physiological recovery. And we're talking about the physiology. We're talking about the body. We're talking about the brain. And I'm also going to offer us a little story here to kind of help really make this gel in terms of physiological recovery. So this is not a picture of me. This is actually a picture of a boy named Pete McLeod. And when I was young, I went fishing all the time in Canada with my dad. And it was one way that he kind of turned it off and went to try and relax. And the owners of this cabin that was way out in the woods, they had a son, Pete, who was just destined to kind of fly planes. And sure enough, he did. He became one of Red Bull's trick plane flyers. And they do crazy stuff. I mean, they fly straight up into the air and then pause, and then they'll do flyovers upside down. I mean, the stuff they do is just, it's really insane. And then it was really fun going back over the years and having conversations with Pete about like some of the biggest challenges associated with his job of being this like crazy pilot. And he really kind of highlighted that, you know, your body is a machine, just like your plane. The same way that you are maintaining your machine, this is the same thing that he has to do for his brain. Like, how do you really train or work towards being a trick plane pilot for Red Bull? Like, what do you think you do? And for him, it was like, I get a lot of sleep, I exercise, I eat incredibly well, I manage my stress. Like, I am a machine, just like I take care of my plane. And we really need to be thinking of ourselves as, you know, these machines that need maintenance and need care. And there's a variety of ways we can do that. The big 3, though, is sleep, eating, and exercise. Research, I'm going to talk about sleep in particular, because that's the big one of those 3. If there was anything that you could reduce burnout or increase performance, sleep is the big one. Meta-analyses across 61 different studies illustrate a very common outcome, that the more sleep you get, the more self-control you have, which self-control is very important in how we stay motivated, how we stay focused, how we stay on track, how we don't lash out at our colleagues or clients. All of those things are super important on a day-to-day, but also cognitively, it increases our attention, working memory, processing speed. Basically, sleep is the primary variable that makes us smarter, believe it or not, right? So that 7 or 8 hours, it really does create a cumulative effect where we have the resources necessary. Some research in the organizational environment has even illustrated that repeated nights of not getting enough sleep, so 6 hours or less, is the equivalent of having a few beers. So I don't know, I guess you could either, you know, bring a few high noons to work with you if you want to experience what it's like to be sleep deprived, trying to get some work done. It also helps with a variety of other different outcomes. decision-making, creativity, work engagement, social loafing, and it can also reduce aggression or hostility in your interactions with others. So physiologically, the number one thing to do to help with burnout is sleep, but also health and exercise, or diet and exercise as well. So we're starting internally, but now we're starting to move out a little bit. So the next is psychological recovery. With psychological recovery, there's a few different things you should keep in mind. For in particular, the first one is that whatever you're doing to recover, it needs to be relaxing. So, everybody relaxes in different ways, or everybody decompresses in different ways. But the one that actually can reduce burnout, or a factor that reduces burnout, is making sure it's as relaxing as possible, as opposed to activating as possible. Another is to actually detach and unplug. So if you are trying to decompress, but you're still looking at your work email, or you're still kind of on, that actually can totally wipe out all the potential effects that you would have received from recovery. So if you're going to detach and you're trying to really reduce burnout, do it right? Really do the unplug and the detachment, which is hard, yours truly included. The third is a sense of mastery in your decisions on what you want to do for your psychological recovery. Do things that you feel as if you're learning, as opposed to doing something what is completely mindless. So for example, the death scrolling that we get into, that doesn't actually lead to as much relaxation that helps with burnout compared to doing something that you enjoy and you're learning. And then finally, choose your own flavor. Do what matters for you. If you're doing something that actually has been chosen for you, that actually is leading to a situation where you don't feel as relaxed and you're not really getting as much potential out of the burnout. So you do you, whatever that means. A fun question I like to bring up, and I'm going to get you involved here. I want to see some chat messages. Is cyber leisure a good way to relax? Is that a really good way to engage in psychological recovery? So just put in yes, no, or whatever fun response you would like here, just to get a little bit of interaction. Is cyber leisure a good way to relax? What do we think? Actually can't see him. I don't know why. That's okay. Oh, here they are. Going to say no. Everybody's saying no, nope, 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 absolutely not. Wow, nobody's saying yes. All right. Well, you are kind of right and kind of wrong. Purposefully did this to make it a little bit more challenging. So evening cyber leisure. We all do it. We're laying in bed, we're hanging out, we're scrolling. We could be doing all sorts of other things. Here's some of the outcomes that we looked at. This is actually a study that I did a few years ago in Journal of Applied Psychology. Evening cyber leisure has a neutral impact on bedtime procrastination, sleep quality, and next day performance when you're doing it in a way that is more mindful. You're present, meaning you're paying attention in the moment. You're not necessarily doing it mindlessly, but you purposefully are saying, hey, I'm going to do this for this experience because I want to relax, and then I'm going to shut it off. But when you are low on mindfulness, it actually can minimize some of these beneficial outcomes. It reduces sleep quality, it increases bedtime procrastination, which in turn leads to worse performance over time. A few others, it's just in the opposite direction. Mindfulness at lower levels can actually lead to less psychological attachment, worse sleep quality, and less performance. Just have the reverse here flipped in the graphs. For the next question, is cyber leisure a good way to take a break at work? I'm sure many of you would probably say the same thing. Nope, probably not a good idea, shouldn't do it. The answer is you should not do it. It actually is not a good way to relax when trying to take a break, especially when you're already looking at a screen. So the research would illustrate that if you really want a good break, you have to do something different than what you currently do. So if you're already typing and looking at something and interacting with technology, the best thing to do is to do something that is the opposite of it, to kind of change the brain waves and get on a different wavelength. Next, now we're starting to get a little bit more logical in terms of what do we actually do with our time? So evaluate, systematize, and prioritize. So when we're looking at our work, we always have to be taking it from the lens of what's coming in and what do I have available to give out? So if we're taking on increased demands, whether it's to our time or to our energy, how are we going to allocate the appropriate resources to make sure that we can handle those increases in demands? So having this evaluate, synthesize, resource approach can be used in many different forms. One that I think works well, that has been talked about a little bit more so in the practitioner literature, is have a system, whatever that system means for you. Those that have some type of system, I like the Allen approach, mine like water. Everything that comes in is recorded somewhere. It's put into a box, it's put into a categorization. I have a timeline for when I'm going to do it. Being more organized so that you constantly don't feel as if like you're forgetting stuff and things are falling through the cracks does have an increased likelihood of making you feel as if you're less burned out because you're more in control. Another exercise, journaling, reflection. You have to figure out for yourself what's working, what's not working, and why. So constantly reevaluating as often as weekly to say, here's what's working and here's what's not working as it relates to this job demands balancing act that I'm trying to accomplish. And then using some type of resource, a lot of people use Trello for work, but also extending this to life as well, or the work-life interface, like figuring out some type of system for yourself that allows you to have some type of platform that anything new goes in, then you reevaluate it and decide how you're going to use it. Number 4 is actually now starting to get a little bit more external, working with others. A lot of times the biggest demand on our time in terms of burnout is the fact that we are pushed by others to do different things that we might not have time for or don't want to do. We have to get really good at not always saying yes, but instead saying yes, no, and sometimes maybe, and being more purposeful in our conversations. So a lot of times when we get asked to do something, especially by our loved ones, or maybe even our boss, we say, oh yeah, I can do that. But really the better answer is, yes, I can do that, but how should I prioritize it? So we need to recognize that we are not just we don't have infinite time or infinite energy, and that we are just this infinite resources being able to get anything and everything done. That's not how it works. We are a machine. We can only handle so many inputs and create so many outputs. So how should I prioritize this is actually the better question, or is the better follow-up to when asked to do something. And then instead of saying, yes, let's start doing that, it's let's start doing that, but what should I stop doing? So as you do commit to new things, assuming if you are already at capacity, or if there is no slack in the system, then the next follow-up question is, okay, well, then what's going to be put aside, or what's going to be something that we're not going to do at all? And so we constantly put ourselves into these positions where we take on more and more, but we A, don't prioritize, and we B, don't reevaluate and say, well, then what if we're going to do this because it's so important, are there other things that are no longer important? So getting into that flow of communicating your limits and having conversations can be helpful. Next, customize your work arrangement. And I think this is important in that, a long time ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if you were given a job and a job description, it literally was all laid out for you. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do on Mondays. Here's what you're going to do on Thursdays. Here's the report you need to get back to me. And that's not how work is anymore. It's more complex. It's more dynamic. It evolves. It changes. Gosh, especially for a startup, right? This is the world we live in. Things constantly change. So it really is on you to own whatever your job responsibilities are, as well as your relationships within work are, and think about how you can engage in what's called job crafting. Job crafting is this idea of recognizing that it's actually your responsibility, not your manager's responsibility, to work on these 4 things. Number 1, increase your social resources. So who do you need access to? What conversations do you need to be having that give you whatever you need in order to grow, develop, or get the things done you need to get done? Increase your structural resources. So do you need decisions to be about specific methods or decisions to be more self-determined? You have more autonomy in certain places? Do you actually need more support where you need somebody else to make the decision for you? What do you need in terms of your structural resources for who does what and why? And then third, increasing challenging demands. You're the only one that really knows where you need to learn and grow and develop. Your leadership and your team, they're there to support you within that endeavor, but it's really on you to figure out where you need to be challenged. And then fourth, thinking through what is actually creating the biggest stress points throughout your week. What are those hindrance demands that you might want to change? And proactively having those conversation points of, this is what's really stressing me out, and this is what I think could potentially be fixed. Let's brainstorm and figure out a way to do it. So it's kind of flipping the script on what used to be the old school mentality of job design. Job design used to be an HR function only, but now it's becoming more of this reciprocal relationship where both need to work on it together. And then the next one is called idiosyncratic deals. So idiosyncratic deals is this idea that you can create customized work arrangements with your employer when necessary to make sure that you're creating a win for both parties. There are all sorts of custom arrangements, whether it be working at certain times, working on certain days, working in certain hours, taking on one role, but then experimenting with a second role. So a lot of times, we don't know until the individual basically leaves the organization because they were, I wish I was able to do X, but instead have those proactive conversations about changing the work arrangement, not just the details of the job as well. If you really are at that point where you are so burned out and you feel like, man, I just want to get out of here, don't do it yet. Really think about job crafting and idiosyncratic deals to see if there's a win-win that everybody is happy with, right? So those are the big five. If I were to summarize some of these for the employee perspective and the employer's perspective, here's what we need to tell your employees. Take action, even though all you really feel like doing is taking a nap. So when it comes to burnout, what do we typically do is we just say, I'm going to check out. I'm going to do some cyber loafing and man, that'll fix the problem. But in reality, all of the fixes for burnout are proactive, and they actually entail taking action to try and solve a problem in one of those 5 domains or the 5 stages that we currently discussed. For employers, the key factor in terms of minimizing burnout is be realistic with job demands and be willing to customize, right? So the time demands, the work demands, everything that we're asking of people is be realistic. Thankfully, I think we are here, not necessarily at other organizations, but also be willing to customize and come up with solutions that we think work for both parties. And if that doesn't work, going back to the first joke that we kind of started off with, remember this quote: "Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive," by Elbert Hubbard, is a good reminder of what we should all be constantly considering, is that when it's all said and done, just kind of get out of this stressful moment for a second and find those outlets. They're going to kind of help you reconnect with humanity. We're all people trying to do the best we can in this chaotic world, and don't be afraid to laugh. That's it. Now we get to do some fun Q&A, if any.
Scott, I know we're all thinking it, so I'm just going to say, I think you're so good at giving these sort of presentations, and you're really smart and able to articulate this stuff really well. And I know everyone here on this call probably appreciates you taking time to share this with all of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That was very nice. I appreciate that. I have fun doing it. Yeah. See all the hearts and the claps. Thank you. Yeah, and it is an important topic. I mean, I think we care a lot about the whole person here. I think it's just kind of part of our culture, and we want people to be happy. We want people to thrive in their work, and it's just a fun reminder to kind of take a step back and make sure that you're happy and healthy with all that you do. And it's such an individual, customized journey for all. These are the frameworks. These are the things to consider, as you go through and think about all the things that you might want to fix. But it really is up to you to take action, right? Don't take a nap, take action. Figure out what you're actually going to solve, and try things. Give it a try. Do some experimentation, do your journaling, think about what you want to try, and talk to your manager if that's necessary on what are all the things you might chip away at to feel a little bit better. Oh, here we go.
Thank you, Scott. I'd love to throw out, I'm curious if anybody else has tried anything that they feel like helps them prevent burning out, that they would be open to sharing as a potential like tool or resource or best practice that other people may want to try. Like if you have something that you feel like works, share it, please, question mark.
I don't think this is like a super tangible thing, but when I have those moments where I can like foresee burnout, or I perceive it, if like this continues for a long time, I like check myself on like, is this a season, or is this how it's going to be? Because that gives my like brain a moment to be like, do I need to talk about this? Or is this like, is this gonna end here in a couple of weeks? Because if it's going to end in a couple of weeks, it's like, all right, my commitment to this, I can make it through those 2 weeks. But if it's like a longer term thing, I'm like, probably should talk to somebody about this and talk about where I'm struggling and where I could use support or help. And that's usually helped me get away from that feeling of like, I don't want to go to work so bad that like, can I like take my steering wheel and just kind of like get into an accident so I don't have to come into work? I know others have felt that. I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. But like to avoid that mentality, like I just check myself on the season.
Yeah. I think that's a really good call out, because look, work was not meant to be easy. I mean, when it's all said and done, we got it pretty easy compared to our ancestors, right? Like we're sitting in air-conditioned offices looking at a computer all day. So, when it's all said and done, when you have to work a 10, 12-hour day because a client needs something, it's not the end of the world. So it's like a good check-in to be like, is this a systemic problem, or is this something that is just a blip on the radar that I got to fight through today? Now, if every other week you get these big spikes of chaos, that's potentially a systemic issue. And then you need to probably go to the job crafting and idiosyncratic deal part of those 5, or the communicate your limits part of that. That 5 framework to kind of figure it out. But that's really good.
Hey, Scott, can you speak to strategic stopping as someone who has like achiever and learning sort of in the top, top 5 strengths? Like, I can use PTO time and be flexible and, that sort of thing, but I can't turn it off just because I'm not in the office. So the thing that caught me as interesting, you talked about the leisure time actually being leisure. And I know some of us on the screen here look to like running or outdoor activity kind of as that segue. And for me, what I have found is I can't shut that off with leisure that is what looks like relaxing to everyone else, because the brain doesn't follow the body. Yeah. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Okay. This will be a little therapy for me, because I also am high on achiever and high on learner, and I absolutely never shut it off. And I'm still dealing with that. So I don't know that I have the perfect answer for it, but I do think that, as you call out, if you have that inability, if you don't have the ability to completely detach, even when you're doing the psychological recovery factors that are like relax, do something of mastery, do something that you choose, we're not actually getting the full potential of our psychological recovery. So that's a potential issue. The strategies that I should be employing, and I think those that have that experience should be employing, are that you have to kind of come up with almost like environmental, like social structural limitations, so that you just don't even have access to it. So for example, I'm going on vacation for the first time in way too long, over a year, and they don't have Wi-Fi. Like it's literally the only way that I will not be on Slack and email for a week. I am going to middle of nowhere, Colorado, and the only way to reach me is through, I don't know, smoke signal probably. And so, I mean, it's the only way to do it for me. And that's just probably an unfortunate reality of having that mindset. Another one is also trying to use or leverage your achiever and organizer mindset to construct your days in ways that allow you to be an achiever in all different parts of your life. So for example, for me, I've gotten better about putting on my do not disturb while doing deep thinking and not answering personal related messages during work hours, and then doing the same on the flip side. And so then it's like, I now have an achiever mind that I'm in dad mode, and I will never do anything other than being, 100% at dad mode. And it's like, I still do it occasionally, still mess up, but at least like applying that mindset in a way that just leverages it rather than hides it.
I don't know if this is helpful to anybody, but I'm also high on achiever, Melanie. And so I allow myself a certain like aspect, like when I'm on vacation. So I'm like, I won't look at Slack, but I will try and do something where I do feel like I'm learning or like contributing to that relationship with work. So I'll like take a book and I'll try and like read a book that's somewhat work related, but also some like a personal passion of mine. I remember like Talking with Strangers I took with me on one vacation. So Malcolm Gladwell. And I didn't take it initially to like work. It was like, I just wanted a book to make sure I was like not on my phone the whole time. And I found so much in that book that related to the work I was doing and how it could translate into my role, that I was like, oh, this is something that I could do where I feel like I am still like contributing, and I can bring back as more of like a refreshed aspect of my like vacationing to work. So that helped me.
I love them.
I think another one, getting into this like achiever conversation, like we're all achievers to some degree, like we wouldn't want to be part of this mission of trying to change the world if we weren't. And I think the biggest challenge for, I think, a lot of knowledge workers, that is particularly those that really enjoy their work, is like saying no or setting the boundaries, which I think was communicate your limits. That was number 4 out of 5, because we don't want to disappoint people, and because we're people pleasers at heart. And I have a hard time with this, but I think the reality is that we have to remind ourselves that we're actually not doing a service to those other parties by not being clear on what we can and can't do within certain timeframes, right? So actually just like agreeing, oh yeah, I'll get this done, I'll get this done, I'll get this done, and then not being able to deliver on it is doing a disservice to the other party, or to the collective at large. And if you're so burned out that you can't continue to stay at a high quality of output, that's also doing a disservice to the collective. But that's a really hard, mindset shift, because it does feel like you're not being a good teammate, or it feels like you're, potentially putting yourself out there to be bonked on the head for like not getting everything done, or not being obliging to somebody else's requests. So it's a fine line, but it has to be a different mindset of like, if you really want to help the collective, you got to be able to communicate, what's on your plate, what's in your queue, what are your priorities, and then figure out what's the best path forward.
Hey, Melanie, I also want to add something to what you were talking about, because lo and behold, I'm very similar too. And I think that I think 2 things that really help me. Like, one, I don't do beach vacations, like go sit on the beach. Like, that makes me so anxious and restless. But if I can like be doing something, like going on volunteer trips, or like something where like your mind gets consumed by something else that you are accomplishing, is so refreshing to me, especially if I like don't know what I'm doing and I get to learn, because I love learning. But I think that the typical model of vacation doesn't have to work for everybody, and that doesn't mean that you're sucking at relaxing. It just means like play to your strengths and how you work and how you rest, right? And I think another thing too is like, I do appreciate all of the like talk about vacation, and I also super appreciate, Scott, how you brought in like things to do in the day to day, because I think actually the bigger risk for burnout is like if you can't reset during the week, right? Like I mean, guys, you got such a generous vacation policy. You can take a vacation every quarter, but like that still doesn't help you in the middle of the quarter when you're like halfway between vacations. Like, and that's not good for the company, you know? And so finding ways that you can, like Melanie, I know you run a ton. I'm sure that's helpful. That actually wouldn't be helpful to me because that would just be a great time for me to get even more in my head. And so like I play ultimate frisbee in the summer and it is a team sport and I have no clue what I'm doing. And by like the fourth point, I'm like, I totally forgot about everything that happened that day because I'm fully consumed and I'm having a blast. And so like whatever it is for you guys, like I think it's super, super important to find ways that you can like forget about work throughout the week.
Yeah.
It will make you better at work.
I love that. And Kirsten, to your point about running. So that was the first thing that I thought of when Scott said that. And I was like, well, I certainly don't come out of that more rested, right? Like I come out physically more tired. But I think running is the only thing that I have found that allows me to, at least trail running, because you have to be present or you'll bite the dust quicker than anything, right? So trail running forces me to be present in that moment in every step, or one, I risk injury. And two, it forces me to be so present that I can't do that, like, dissociative thinking that you can do on a road run, right? Where you can, in your mind, be thinking of like the things that you need to do or the things that, the conversations you need to have. Like you can't think about your task list. And so I love that. I think that's why I do like running, but it's not restful, to Scott's point. It's the opposite of that. And it's the only way the brain will shut off.
Yep. It hits on all of those four factors of psychological recovery, like the four things you really should be doing, right? You're detaching because you're not doing work. You're doing something that to you is relaxing. It physically can feel like you got the dopamines going on. So I'm going to like kind of flesh everything out. It's also what you want to do. You've made that choice and it's self-determined. Those are all good things. Yeah.
Something that I've been doing recently throughout the past couple of weeks is taking just like 10 minutes between meetings or around lunch or just whenever I've had free time in my days. And I walk, we have a treadmill because it's insanely hot out here and nobody wants to walk outside, but I've just been taking 10 or 15 minutes with a book on the treadmill just to walk at like a low pace. Like I can shut off and not have to think. I don't have my phone or my laptop. It's 10 or 15 minutes. So you're not like, the world's not going to burn down at work in the middle of the day if you're offline for a couple minutes, but having a book lets me like focus on something more enjoyable while I'm still moving my body, but not having to worry about work. And that's been really helpful for me lately. So.
That's awesome. It's a good example too, of like doing something different than what you're currently doing, right? You're like, the book helps you take your mind to a whole different space and getting outside of the walls that you're currently in. It's something different.
Okay, so I have a question. Everyone talks about journaling. It was like the thing to do. And so I listened to podcasts and bought a cute little journal and a new pen. And everyone's like, just sit in front of the paper and just like, let it all come out. Okay, well, after about 4 minutes of me staring at this blank piece of paper, I was just ticked at myself because I had nothing to write, or I was writing like to-do lists. So do you have a place that you can go for like prompts, or does it all just flow out of you easily?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, some people just use it as like an outlet for like what happened today that was good and that was bad. And then some like use specific prompts. I've heard people use prompts that are basically, it's actually kind of the same prompts I use with my kids. What was the peach in the pit? Like, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And just start there, and see what happens. Also, a lot of people have, I do this too. I have specific goals that I set every year, and they've got, a few different categories, and they've kind of got some subdimensions. And then every week I get that goal list back out, and then I kind of journal on how am I doing on each one of these goals or sub goals. So it's like you have some structure And it also becomes kind of like a continuous conversation of, I've already decided these are the things I'm going to think about. And then you start to have some continuation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd also
Kelsey,
give it go ahead.
Kelsey, I recently got into journaling, and same thing, like had tried it in years past, but the thing that has helped me this go around is my only like expectation really is like a sentence. And so like if I write more than that, that's great, but I mean, I don't really hold myself to anything more than that. So often, like, I've found that if I just start writing that sentence, other stuff will, kind of flow from there. But I don't have this big expectation to write like a page or pages or even a paragraph. I just, and a lot of days it is just a sentence, but I found that pretty helpful.
Set the expectations low.
I have something. Kirsten, are you okay if I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. I worked with a friend who was like a professional coach for a while, and he had this really good feedback of like, if you're having trouble starting something, instead of saying I'm going to do it for like at least a minute, just say I'm not going to do it for more than a minute. Like once you hit a minute, you stop, so that's all you'll do. And I was reading like a Tim Ferriss book on the habits of like highly successful people. And one of them was stream of consciousness journaling. So you wake up, there's no prompt, there's no goal. You literally just start writing and just keep going, even if it's just like writing like ha 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 or whatever, and let the thoughts come out. And I found that was a really nice way to start my day, kind of get a sense of how I was feeling. So you could try that too.
One thing that's been helpful for me on and off over the past several years, for all of my fellow neurotic, anxious humans, there's an app I use. It used to be called CBT Thought Diary. Now I think they've relabeled it as Clarity, but it's a journaling thing. It has prompts, but it also like I get a notification. I set whatever time I want to get it. For me, I get it at 8:00. And it just gives me, it's like a recap of the day. And then it goes through and it's like, have you had any negative or anxious thoughts? What are they? And then just helping me think through like what's causing them, what in them is based in reality, what of them is more just my own kind of thoughts, and being able to tie those to fears and start thinking like, what is the actual reality of this versus what are situations I'm making up in my head? And I found it's been really helpful, and it's free. So
Cool.
Two other things on journaling that I actually want to tie back to work is one, this is why I love OKRs, because OKRs are very much about learning and adjusting. And so as you start to realize like, set goals, if you realize like, you can't, or you're not prioritizing it well, or you're burning out on it, or whatever it is, like the whole point is to be able to like, you've set it so you can keep it top of mind, and then you can adjust. Like, oh, it was too ambitious. It wasn't ambitious enough. Like, I'm not resourceful enough. Actually, this is like, I'm confused now on my role function. Like all those things that Scott said earlier. Like, OKRs should help us as an organization, like, be able to verbalize well when we're hitting on points of burnout, and then be able to learn and adjust from that. And then I also want to call out Alex, because Alex actually does a monthly reflection and will journal. He'll like block it on his calendar for an hour at the end of the month. And then in the next one-on-one, we'll talk about it. Like, hey, what are you reflecting on? What do you want to adjust? Like, what's going really well? What have you like learned new this month? That kind of a thing. And I think that is like such a great practice that he instituted. And I learn a lot from just what he's learning from those reflections. So Alex, I don't know if you're in a good spot to say like, how you actually structure that time. Like, do you do a prompt for those like Kelsey who like struggle with journaling, or do you just stream of consciousness like Ben said?
Yeah, I do have a prompt as part. What have I completed the last 30 days? What have I learned, observed? What questions do I have, and what should I have done? And kind of like reflecting of like, what could I have done, or what should I have done differently? So that's just kind of the prompt that I liked. But actually what's been most helpful about this is just having Kirsten hold me accountable to doing it, because I'm so likely to not do it. And so just having her as like someone who just like says once a month, hey, did you do it? And I feel really guilty if I don't. So that actually goes a long way. And it's, I think, really low effort for Kirsten too.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that actually the accountability part is potentially applicable to all of the different mini interventions of recovery that are in here. For example, Kirsten's example of being on the Frisbee team, right? So a lot of times we won't actually, go do that workout, or we won't actually go and do whatever was potentially going to be relaxing, because if we cancel, it's pretty easy. We don't even have to tell anybody. We just like in our head are like, oh, I'm not doing that. But when you're on something that is social and there's other people that are connected to it, it actually forces you to do it. That can be a good mechanism for accountability. Everybody feeling good? Everybody's gonna do their 5. Get some sleep. Do your recovery. Set your limits. Communicate your limits. Craft when necessary. Work with your manager.
I love it. Scott, can you share that slide deck, or maybe we can send like a little screenshot, maybe of that slide for anybody who maybe wants to like save it on their desktop or someplace for easy reference?
Yeah, good idea. For sure. Will do.
Awesome. Everybody, thanks, Scott. Thank you again so much, Scott.
Happy to do it.
Appreciate it so much.
Thanks for being
Before, like, good tee up, because August is Wellness Month, and we had some fun with it last month. I'm going to hand the mic to Nicole. Do you want to speak up? Taylor, Evan, a little bit about what may be coming for August?
Sure. It doesn't really matter who takes it, because we're still ironing out details. But as probably most of you, except maybe like Alex and Lane, remember, last August we did August Wellness Month. So it includes a different challenge each week that revolves around this sense of a sense and practice of wellness, and like what that looks like for you individually. And we are working on bringing that back, but it'll be a little different this year. We are taking a new approach to it to be even more like individualized to what fits for you, opposed to making it competitive against each other, because that's not always necessarily, a fair approach to it. But the hope is that it'll be just as fun. We'll be able to try some new things and learn some new things. We'll still have like that learning aspect to it, and likely a participation reward if you are involved in at least 3 weeks. So yeah, that's all I've got. Taylor, Lauren, anyone else that's working on this? Evan, do you have any input?
No, I mean, I think we're going to communicate out to all the details in the coming week. So you'll hear from us soon on what's going on with
start next week though, right? Isn't it the following week? Yeah.
Right. The first full week of August.
Cool. Awesome. Well, if there is nothing else, have a lovely Wednesday, everyone. And avoid burnout. All the good ways. Thanks again, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.